Well, it's no mystery that I've given Dawntrail its fair share of vitriol. Nearly a year later, I'm still looking back and finding new flaws that only redoubles my frustration with this game. Had that very epiphany recently when I was scrolling through footage of Living Memory. Thinking back on how rushed the final zone was, the final zone that had been teased since the climax of Endwalker 2.5 years prior. The part of Dawntrail that was being advertised before anything else. And they shortchanged it. Damn it, Square, my nostalgia will only save you for so long. But that's not what had me banging my head against the desk so hard as the permanent imprint of my happy face. It was the Endless, and how they don't work on any narrative level whatsoever. Obviously, spoilers for Dawntrail through patch 7.2 lie ahead. Best click away now, the sound of Wooklamal's voice has been known to cause cardiac arrest. The paramedics have already dropped by my house twice this week, it's terrible. And I'd like to start by clarifying something. We've discussed the Endless on this channel before. I've made clear that our characters deleting them was a complicated moral decision that was treated like an afternoon stroll. And while the lore and other sources keep arguing they're not real people, and there was nothing bordering on psychopathic about our decisions, I was very uncomfortable with just how nonchalant we treated the situation. I still stand by that perspective, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. It's about the narrative structure of the Endless, their point in the story, the idea the writers were apparently aiming for, and how they fall short of accomplishing any of it. And also, to avoid complications, we won't be including anything about Calyx from 7.2 in this analysis. I know his interest in the Endless may create new avenues for discussion. For now though, everything is speculative. I'd rather avoid it, at least until we know more. And a good start will be the conflicting tone the Endless left us with. The entirety of Dawntrail's unbearable secession right questline. Hot damn man, we wasted so much time playing Dora the Explorer. I'm still mad about that. The entire point, the message, was about understanding other people, their views and cultures, the hows and whys of their society. It went so far as to make us sympathize with the Mamulja, who were actively engaging in eugenics, killing hundreds of babies, maybe thousands, all to create a two-headed Mamul to lead their people to greatness. Because the two-headed Mamul who'd been running the country for 80 years was apparently a complete deadbeat. And we solved this dilemma with freaking vegetables. Yet, when we get to the Endless, suddenly the empathy that's been preached to us endlessly got thrown out the window. We don't consider their feelings when pulling the plug. We don't try to get a consensus for these people and their mindsets. Kafkawa simply tells us to burn the place to the ground, and we hardly questioned her before we grabbed a can of gasoline and some matches. The shift in sentiment was abrupt enough to cause whiplash. It is exceptionally bewildering when you recall all the people we played nice with throughout Living Memory. Recall the man we met early on, looking to reunite with his lost love. We helped him out, treated him like a real person with real feelings. And then we locked him in the shed and Molotov cocktailed the bitch. Classy. We spent considerable time performing a play, with dialogue befitting this god-awful expansion. All to entertain the children, of course. The not real children that we subsequently corralled onto a bus and drove into a Let's move along. All these little quests they forced us to do, between the stupid play, exploring a museum, and riding around on flying whatever those things were before we pulled the plug on Kafkawa, it was all to appease and play nice with not real people. Why? Why did we interact with these not real things, wasting real time while there was a doomsday clock ticking at the Mezzo terminal? Why did we not skim past these not real people and shut off the lesser terminals, which were unguarded, exposed, and accessible anytime the game wished it? Interacting with these not real people did not advance the plot, except for maybe Krau's parents. Not real parents. As if she didn't get shredded enough in this game. But that's about it. Shoot, this place has so little to offer us. One of the main characters we do deal with is Otis. Again, we already had an arc with him back in Alexandria, and they brought him back to take up screen time. This was an utter waste of the zone's potential. All of this was wasteful. Did nothing for the plot, except for Krau's not real parents, and there was a legitimate threat to actual real people ticking in the background. The dimensional fusing was a real threat. The means of accessing it were always available to us, and none of this did anything. It didn't provide us with any necessary component vital in winning. You could erase 90% of the main quests in Living Memory and lose nothing of importance. And all we got in return was a terribly written play. It's a simulated afterlife and you cheap bastards couldn't afford a proper soundstage? You know, even in death we're being shortchanged, go figure.
Do you want to go to heaven? Because it's like $10 to get in.
And the only excuse we got is, they're not real people. They're not alive, they're NPCs. You wouldn't feel bad about killing NPCs in the game, would ya? Except, a lot of players do take exception to that kind of thing. We're not all psychopaths. I mean, I am. I always assumed I was an outlier. At least I hope so. Also, I'm pretty sure the Endless possess far greater self-awareness than the standard video game NPC. I've argued these points to death, I won't push it further. I'm just discussing the tonal shift the writers fumbled over themselves trying and failing to validate. And what makes it worse, they do have us treat the Endless like people. At least one of them. The Endless theme. While we're told all these randos don't matter, she was pushed center focus. Her similarities with Woklama were made apparent. Similar desires for their people, was Fiend willing to push it to atrocious levels. Just look back at the final fight. When the furry twat interrupts our trial, what does she say?
I feel your pain, as if it were my own.
But she's not real. Her emotions are just copied from the real Fiend. She's not real. The people we erased here were things, nothing more, and as an Endless, Sphene is too. Why did they push so hard to make us sympathize with her? Worst of all, they did this through Wook, a character they spent the entire game making right about everything. With that sort of pattern recognition, why would we assume anything different here and now? You want us to believe the Endless are just ones and zeros, except for the antagonist who you compare heavily to the protagonist. Which, yes, was Wook. Do you guys see the contextual issues with this setup? You can't just tell us Endless aren't real people, turn around and treat the prime douchebag of the not real people like a person. This is the final confrontation, the climax of your story, and you decided to take this developed emotional conflict and label it a battle against a computer role-playing as a real girl. Can you not see how these decisions significantly devalue so much of the story? Just like it was with the Secession of Right's obsession with understanding people, they wanted to drive an idea home about the need to let go, to not obsess over preserving what was. Ideas that are supposedly expressed through the Endless. But then it became inconvenient and thus was abandoned. Stellar frickin' writing. This isn't an isolated incident either. Zorolja got done just as dirty. All these complicated societal problems during the Right were treated with dignity. Solutions were conjured to aid and improve people's lives. Sphene got similar generosity despite her clear opposition to us. I mean, I thought it was obvious from the start, but the story tried to treat it like a plot twist. I don't know whose jaw was supposed to drop at this moment. But Zoral, his entire character arc was just daddy issues. Nepotism. And he was just wrong. There was no attempt by the benevolent Woklama to reach out and mend the wounds. No attempt to understand him. Zero attempt to develop or understand. Dawntrail is a narrative mass of contradictions. Back to the Endless. The issues are only amplified by remarks the real Sphene makes in 7.2, stating that Queen Eternal was an entity of different experiences that shaped her into the person she became. This would imply that even if the Endless aren't considered alive and don't have souls, they are nonetheless unique individuals. Who knows what other personalities, perspectives, and knowledge we wistfully deleted? Kryle's parents had intimate expertise in Alexandrian history. There's no telling who else here possessed similar information. We didn't even think about it, did we? And try and remember, Alexandria, as we know it today, was cultivated over centuries. In apocalyptic war, a revolutionary power source through the Electrope, giving rise to advanced technology. The Endless would consist of people during the early years of this rapid change as well as the more recent generations. Centuries of development that would only now exist in living memory, because soul usage only staves off death, not aging. We saw as much with Namika. Living memory would therefore possess insurmountable knowledge found nowhere else in Alexandria, or anywhere else in the FF14 multiverse, and we deleted all of that, because not real people. Look, ignore the debate of whether they're alive or not. History is a real thing, and we, the Scions, went full Asian with leveling the whole thing to the ground. Does that sound in line with our character, the Scions characters? I have said it before, bad writing infects everything around it. Now we've been dragged into the gutter as well. The point I'm getting at with the tonal shift is that the writers wanted it both ways. They wanted an emotional investment with this final zone of the game to keep us engaged, which is understandable. Getting your audience emotionally immersed in the story is something most writers want to achieve. But then they took away that investment when the timing was convenient. And like so much of FF14 in recent years, from Hermes to Vana to pretty much everything in Dawntrail, this shit does not work that way. You cannot cherry pick which values matter and when. I remember the preachy folk back in church being blatantly hypocritical like this. It didn't suit me then, and not much has changed. Unlike issues with Endwalker, it's obvious by the divisiveness with this expansion that many players aren't buying a cheap script this time around. The Dawntrail writers sabotaged their own narrative with this massive singularity of plot contradictions.
We don't get paid enough to do stuff.
contradictive themes and pointless quests to pad out the runtime, that we as the characters in this situation would not be doing if it was not forced on us. Because we don't have to do these stupid pointless things to get what we needed, and real lives are at risk if we waste time. And yet, we did waste time. I'm starting to think Hades recommended the Golden City as a prank. Hyphodeus was in on it. Whimsy pricks. I miss you guys. Alright, so what? It's a game. The main point is obviously gameplay, completing quests, fighting monsters, etc. That's what matters. Did anybody actually play Dawntrail? All we did was stand around and talk.
Round and round we go.
Mainly about cultural values that had zero impact on the larger story. Which, okay, granted, much of 14's questing is like that. Some commenters in past videos have stated as such in defense of this travesty to RPGs. What makes a difference though, is the story. I've said it before, 14 is very heavily story-driven gameplay. So, what happens when the story is ass? Your gameplay becomes ass. We could do all the same things from Dawntrail and say Shadowbringers. And knowing that the gorgeous music in the background, the apocalyptic setting to explore, pretty much every cutscene with Emmett Selk, those made everything worth it. Dawntrail gave us this.
Steam! Listen to me!
This was not worth it. I know 7.2 gave us some improvements. Removing Wook from most of the story patch was very nice. Progress is progress, but more is required. This is just an argument some have been making for a while. I just wanted to cover it real quick and get it out of the way. Especially because it feeds into another conundrum with the Endless. The dilemma surrounding them doesn't make much sense either. The overarching issue everybody falls back on is that they consume souls. So long as the Endless exist, the souls of innocents will be consumed to power them and living memory. It's why Sphene was attempting the interdimensional fusing, waging war with Tural. Terribly. This is all true. What has never been properly explained, however, why souls? Specifically, nearly a year later, I'm still baffled by this very particular requirement. I can logically understand the use of souls in Alexandria, using one to sustain your life after a critical injury. With the Endless, it's a bit more perplexing. They're not alive. Everybody is insistent on this key point. It's the one thing that makes what we do here not a war crime. If they're not alive, why do they consume souls? Only souls, to remain powered. I understand the soul is a unique creation in the lore. Even the Amortines, for all their knowledge and abilities, acknowledge that the soul was a gift from the planet itself. They could not create life on such a level. By the way, don't introduce these guys to Mayuri Kurasuchi from the Bleach anime. He would have a field day lording this shortcoming over their heads, and probably do some horrifying experiments on them, good lord. That the soul has unique properties, I don't doubt at all, but you still need to explain what those properties are and how they pertain to the Endless. Dawntrail has not done this. They're powered by souls because so much of Alexandria is powered by souls. And if you start to poke holes in this thin canopy, you can see how quickly it splinters apart. There are multiple power sources in the FF14 universe that could be a suitable replacement for souls, and we have encountered some very advanced allies over the years. Point is, we have options that we ignore, further devaluing the very point of the Endless. Why were we here again? I've talked about this before, so apologies to any regular viewer sitting through the same lecture. But that was in a broader context. Today, I'm specifically addressing how this impacts the Endless. Because their need to be powered by souls has no narrative value outside of it's what the writers wanted. No solid reason, no additional context to help us understand. Seen as to how the writers themselves refuse to let our ingenious cast of brainiacs consider alternate means of stemming this threat. It's rather obvious, at least to me, that they don't have a solid reason either. If there's no good reason for something, then we do not need it. It does not matter. Therefore, your plot does not matter. How are we supposed to believe in this story, these characters, when it depends on us not asking questions? I have had the same problems with Endwalker for over 3 years now. This is nothing new for 14. The specific need for souls driving our motivation to shut down living memory and the Endless, the justification for our actions outside of they're not real people, has no reason to exist. And so neither does anything else. Living memory and Sphene's obsession do share some similarity to the Ascians and their motivations. Hell, even Sphene's preaching at times reminded me of Hades. A cheap imitation, of course. But there are some stark differences. The Ascians wanted to rejoin the world to get their society back, make humanity what they once were, and recreate Zodiark in his entirety, so he could revive the souls consumed in his creation. Pretty straightforward. There's not many alternate routes they could have taken to achieve this goal. It does leave much to the imagination. Did they try to adapt to the sundered world created by Hydaelyn? Was there a period where they lived in harmony before the anger and resentment? The longing for home got the best of them. I know it's not the point, here and now. I just can't help but wonder about their mindsets during the early days of the Sundered era. Even without intimate details, we know enough to see that there wasn't another choice to get their lives back. Sphyn's desire lacks that same logical consistency. It felt like the Dawntrail writers wanted the same emotional experiences, but didn't understand or just didn't care how those stories made these ideas work out. It's all too common these days, with people mimicking great ideas giving no credence to how these ideas are meant to function. The only thing that might steer this catastrophe back on track would be Calyx and whatever he has planned. He's only spoken of evolution, which in villain speak is as broad and diabolical as it gets. That, and he did show quite an interest in our Azim crystal. A secret in the making, or are we looking too far into things? With this expansion, I'm not inclined to get my hopes up, because while we now understand why the Sphyn from 7.0 was so illogical in her approach, given that she was being controlled by Calyx, we still have other problems. What does the mass consumption of souls have to do with evolution? How did Zorol's faulty assault on Tuliolo aid in this endeavor? Calyx was secretly in control of the system and the military all along. It had to have been his idea. Why did he arrange all this just to lose the key, something he seems keen on getting back, after losing it through very avoidable reasons? There's a lot of mending to do, and I fear the remaining 3 post-Dawntrail story patches don't have the grit to pull it off. Perhaps this will all continue into the next expansion. That may be one way to salvage the story, time will tell. Oh, and since I couldn't think of where else to put this, the Juno Alliance raids reintroduced Arilja, a character nobody was excited to see again. Yes, even you, who is about to argue with that claim. Anyways, he apparently found a way to use Mamul's summoning methods and Electrope to create facsimiles of people from another world, including a more ruthless version of Goluljaja. It's too soon to conclude anything with the raid storyline. I just found it hilarious that so much emphasis was put on Xing out the Endless just to introduce another variation with these shadows Surreal produces, that apparently do not require soul consumption. There's a potential solution right here in the aftermath of 7.0. Again, too soon to say for certain. I just wanted to put it out there. Normally, this is the part where I recommend some solutions. A few rewrites to capture the ideas the developers had in mind, minus the excess baggage that dragged it down. The man whose lover we helped track down, for example. I figured if we wanted to show how dysfunctional living memory was, after we finish helping him and continue exploring, we find him wandering around again, doing the same thing, clueless as to what just happened. The idea being that the people who have been here the longest have fractured memories. They weren't designed to retain themselves indefinitely. Like a dementia patient, they get confused and lose their sense of self. It might have been a cruel means of showing us how false this utopia of Sphyn's really is. It puts the focus more squarely on her and her refusal to let them go, even as the people become increasingly lost, even to themselves. Now, the younger generations, those more recently arrived, they could be more stable. But we all know it's a matter of time before they too begin to fragment. This could help explain Kafka's motivation in asking us to erase the Endless. Hell, we could turn the whole zone into a live-action Sims game with Sphyn as the administrator. The memories of Alexandrians are her prisoners, even if she doesn't see it that way. That would be freaky. But with the revelation of 7.2 seemingly being geared towards retconning events, I'm not sure it's worth the time attempting a rewrite. Who knows how many of these problems will be left when it's said and done. Maybe they'll actually pull off a miracle and give Dawntrail a decent send-off.
Incompetent fools!
Yeah, I'm not getting my hopes up for that either. Frankly, the Endless and Living Memory should have been their own expansion. I'm not exaggerating. Themes of letting go, moving on, progressing and evolving as a society and an individual, the price of eternal life, they're all great concepts, just in a terrible story. The writers lost so much gravitas deciding to treat the Endless as not real. It removes the moral weight of our decisions. It eliminates any value in our interactions with them, making all of this, once again, pointless. Had they been real people and treated as such, now we have a real dilemma on our hands. Now we have to consider the lives we're destroying versus the ones we'll be saving. Now all our little side quests with the mines in this place mean something because the plot isn't telling us they're not real, just pull the plug. And it makes the loss of shutting everything down so much more impactful, as compared to the humdrum I felt when everything was said and done. I've been playing Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and don't worry, there's no spoilers here. But there are some striking similarities between that storyline and some of Dawntrail's, of how to execute these ideas properly and how not to. I'd love to talk about it once I finish the game. There's some great content to be made. As for Living Memory, it was a delightful idea of how technology may one day eliminate the human condition as we know it, a conceptual framework of dystopian fiction. Square Enix turned it into a filler zone with bad acting. That will forever be my biggest complaint. Not the boring gameplay, not the pointless life lessons that we all learned when we were in kindergarten. Not even Wook obnoxiously being forced into every little facet of this game top to bottom. It's a close second, however. No, it's the lost potential. The realization of what could have been if somebody hadn't gotten the dim-witted idea to turn this brilliant concept into a grade school children's presentation. In the hands of a decent writer, this expansion could have kicked off a whole new arc that may well have rivaled the Assi and Zodiark and Hydaelyn. Now here we are, praying against the odds that the next few patches remedies the problems. I am at a loss for how we got here. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Feel free to leave your own, as always. We still have a few more Endwalker topics to get out of the way, and we will finally be done with that video series. If you're looking for something new, we branched out recently covering the Netflix Devil May Cry series, and what a complete joke of a show that turned out to be. There will be more of that as well in the near future. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Till then.